What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Crew Cab Dart YouTube channel. My name is Justin, and as you guys know, we've been putting a 5.7 Hemi in this junky old 1993 Dodge Ram. We partnered with Aces EFI to get this old rig running. Aces has sent me their all-new Jackpot fuel injection system for the Gen 3 Hemis. So here we have Aces top end kit that comes with a slick fabricated sheet metal intake, our Jackpot ECU, 7-inch handheld display, our main wire harness, all our sub harnesses, and all sensors we need to get this thing running. To break this kit down, here we have our fabricated sheet metal intake, our billet fuel rails, and our 800 horsepower capable 65 pound-an-hour fuel injectors. This intake will accept a stock throttle body or other aftermarket throttle bodies, whether you want to do drive-by-wire or drive-by-cable. Moving on down the line here, we have our small but mighty Jackpot ECU. This one in particular is capable of handling drive-by-wire and drive-by-cable applications, as well as controlling a multitude of different transmissions. Next up, we have our upgraded 7-inch display. It'll allow us to view all our sensor data, make some on-the-fly tuning adjustments, and it's packed with a ton of other features. Last but not least, we have our wiring harness and all our sub harnesses to tie all the Aces fuel injection stuff to our Gen 3 Hemi. So let me bring in and show you just how simple this harness really is. So we're going to start with the very end of our harness here. With the heart of it all, our Jackpot ECU clipped right into place. Moving on down, you have our integrated fuses for both our main power relay and our fuel pump relay fused right into the harness. Here is our CAN connector. This is where we would plug our handheld into, as well as our computer tuning cable right into there. Moving on down, we have our main power relay and an integrated fuel pump relay. And here is the most important connections we have. Here's our main ground, our main hot, our ignition signal, and our fuel pump trigger wire. These are the only 4 wires that you're going to have to hardwire in. Now, something to take note of is that you're going to want this ground and this hot to go directly to your negative and your positive battery terminals, nowhere else whatsoever. And for your ignition signal, you want to provide a good, clean ignition signal when the key is on and while the key is cranking. You need to verify that it does not lose power when you're cranking. Some do. Always check on that. And then, as you guys saw, we have an integrated fuel pump relay. So in most instances, on pumps under 15 amps, you can run this wire straight to trigger your fuel pump. So moving on down, we have our additional wires connector here. There's a ton of circuits in here, like your tack out. You have a fan 1 and fan 2 signal, an AC signal. There's a bunch of different circuits in here. You may not use any of them. You may use all of them. You may use some of them. So that's going to be application specific. Here we have our electronic throttle control connector. If you're going to be running a drive-by wire setup, you'll use this sub harness. Here we have our pedal position sensor. It'll plug into our gas pedal. And then the other end will plug straight to our stock drive-by-wire throttle body. So down the line from our throttle control connector, we have our cam and crankshaft position sensor sub harness. It'll plug right in here. And you'll notice that this is a 58X there. So this sub harness and this whole kit will support any Gen 3 Hemi from 2009 forward that uses a 58 tooth reluctor wheel. Here, clearly labeled, we have our camshaft position sensor connector. We'll just run that up to the stock Gen 3 Hemi cam position sensor connector. And then here, labeled crank, we'll run that right down to our stock crank position sensor. We'll be good to go. So this system does support a dual wideband oxygen sensor setup. So we'll take our provided widebands and plug them both respectively into their connectors. Here we have our injector connector. It'll plug directly into our provided injector sub harness, which then in turn will plug directly into your stock fuel injectors, or in my case, our provided 65 pound-an-hour fuel injectors. Each connector is clearly labeled to its respective cylinders. They'll lay right out the way it needs to. Easy peasy, nothing to be concerned with. So next up we have our transmission control connector. Being as this ECU does support transmission control, here is where we would plug in our provided, say, 4L60E transmission sub harness. But I'm running a 5-speed manual on the truck, so I'll just leave that unplugged. So now we get to our sensor connector. So in this particular case, Aces actually has provided two separate sub-harnesses. Both are the same sensor sub-harness, and both connect to the same four sensors, which would be your map sensor, your throttle position sensor, your intake air temperature sensor, and your idle air control valve. But the difference is that one sub-harness is going to be using the provided Aces intake air temperature sensor as well as the Aces provided map sensor, whereas the other sub-harness will plug into your stock style map sensor and your stock style intake air temperature sensor. Both harnesses have the same idle air control valve and throttle position sensor connector if you're going to be using drive-by cable throttle bodies. I personally am using the drive-by wire throttle bodies, so I will be using neither one of these two connectors no matter which sub-harness I use. So now we get to our two ignition connectors here. You'll see one is labeled 1357, the other is labeled 2468. So from these two connectors, you have two coil drivers. They'll plug in. Say we're going to do the 2468 side. They'll plug in. You're going to want to ground this coil driver on its respective cylinder head, and then you'll get to the coil harness itself, both also labeled to their respective cylinders. There's 2, 4, 6, and 8. It will plug in right here, and then you'll just simply take your coil connector and plug it into your stock ignition coil. Do that for both sides, and you're good to go there. Continuing on to our last sub-harness, we have our knock sensor sub-harness here. It'll plug right in, and then you're going to ground this to the back of a cylinder head, and then you'll run each of these connectors down to your factory knock sensors, and they'll snap right in place. The last sensors we have is our fuel pressure sensor. Not necessary. If you have it, great. If you don't, that's fine. Then we have our coolant temperature sensor. So this is the only sensor that is required that isn't provided, at least it wasn't provided at the time that I got this early kit here. And I'll put up on the screen the temperature sensor that I grabbed off of Amazon, but it'll thread right into the Hemi water pump in place of the factory sensor, but you do have to use this GM style sensor. And then finally, we have this shielded wire go into our factory oil pressure sensor. It'll plug right in, and you're all set. You're ready to run. So hopefully this gives you a good idea of what all we're working with here with the Aces Jackpot Hemi controller. But fact of the matter is, this truck can't do truck stuff until I get it all installed. So that's enough talking about it. Let's just get into it. So, as you guys just saw, we got our coils plugged up, we have our sub-harness connected, and we've mounted our coil drivers. So I just want to take this time to remind you that each individual coil driver has its own ground that needs to be plugged into its respective cylinder head. Therefore, the driver side coil driver needs to be grounded on the driver side cylinder head. The passenger side coil driver needs to be grounded on the passenger side cylinder head. Let me bring you in. I'll show you where I'm grounding everything here. So here we have our passenger side coil driver. Here's the ground that goes to it. And what I'm doing is where these heater tubes bolt to the back of the cylinder head, I'm just using that. I'm going to slide this ground in between the heater tube and the cylinder head and thread that in place. Here is our driver side coil driver ground. We're going to be grounding it right back here where this heater tube mounts on the back of the cylinder head. But we also have the ground for the knock sensor circuit. We're just going to throw it in there with this driver side ground, and it should be good to go. Well, we have our main harness and all our sub harnesses laid out, routed. All our sensors are plugged up. We're looking pretty good. So because I'm going for a pretty clean install here, I've elected to run my harness inside this inner fender, which is going to put my PCM somewhere in here. Because of that, it's on the opposite side of the engine bay from my battery. So I'm going to have to do some extending on my wires here. It's not really a big deal, just something you want to keep in mind when you are extending some of these wires is you always want to make sure you're using the same gauge wire. For example, the fuel pump wire, the battery hot and ground, they're all 10 gauge, so I want to be sure that whatever I add to it to get over there is going to be another 10 gauge wire. But before we get into extending some wires, I'm going to go ahead and get the intake manifold prepped and ready to go on. So let's jump into that. So to start with, on getting this intake manifold ready, we're going to route our injector sub harness. Should be a pretty straightforward step. Each injector connector is labeled to its corresponding cylinder, and all the cylinder locations for these Hemis is going to be the same as like old school Chevrolet, old school Mopar, where you go, you start with the driver's side front cylinder and you cross banks. You go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and so they have it labeled that way on the injector harness, injector sub harness installed. So now we'll install our sensor sub harness, which, like I said earlier, I'm going to be using a drive-by-wire pedal and throttle body. I will not be using the IEC and the TPS, but I will be using the map sensor, which I'm going to use the connector that corresponds with the Aces map sensor right back there. And then the other wire will run to the front, will be my intake air temperature sensor. I don't have it on just yet, so we're just going to kind of route this up here, let it hang out. So I wanted to make just a quick note of where the vacuum ports are located on this intake manifold. Now it comes with all the different fittings you would need under here. You have 4 options for ports. You have a big one and 3 smaller ones. I'm going to be using this one for my brake booster and this one for my vacuum controls on my air conditioning. But I think we've got this thing pretty well ready to install. Well, we've got our intake manifold bolted on, our sensor and injector sub harness is plugged up, and this thing is like really close to running, not far whatsoever. But we've got some bad weather coming in tonight. I really don't care to do a twister remake around here, so I think we're going to pick back up when the weather passes. So we're back, the storms have passed, everybody's rebuilt, we're all good. So it's time to get back on this Hemi-swapped truck here. We're really close to getting this thing running. Now I will say, I did a couple things off camera here and there between the last clip you saw and now. So let me bring you in, let me get you up to speed, and we'll get this thing finished up, get it running in no time. You may notice that I mounted my computer out here rather than in this area where I had initially planned to. It's just way easier to mount out here. But that didn't change the fact that I had to extend these 4 wires right over here. The 10 gauge black wire is going directly to the negative post of the battery. The 10 gauge red wire is going directly to the positive post of the battery. I went ahead and finished up my cooling system and added my cooling fan, and that is where this additional wires harness comes in. In the additional wires harness, I'm using my radiator fan 1 and radiator fan 2 wires here. The radiator fan 1 wire is going to be controlling the low speed fan circuit, while the radiator fan 2 wire is going to be controlling the high speed fan circuit. Both of these wires are going to be controlling the negative side of their respective relays. The last wire that we're going to be using in our additional wires harness is our AC signal wire. When the computer sees that the AC is turned on, it's going to adjust idle speed to compensate for the extra load of the AC compressor, as well as trigger our radiator fans to pull air through the condenser. Another thing I finished up off camera was my fuel system. I'm using Aces billet fuel pressure regulator as well as their 6AN PTFE lines and fittings. I actually have an entire video dedicated just to the fuel system on this truck. I'll link that down below if you want to check that out. So now that I have you caught up and we're all on the same page, we've got just a couple more things to do under the hood out here before we're ready to hop inside, go through the wizard, and hear this thing run. Last couple things we have to hook up under the hood here is our drive-by-wire sub harness. We'll clip that in right here, and then I'll plug in our throttle body. And then I already have the accelerator pedal wire run inside and hooked up to the accelerator pedal. And then here we have our intake tube that houses our intake air temperature sensor. We'll slip it on and plug that in. Now that we have everything buttoned up under the hood, we're inside the truck, we have our 7-inch handheld display, and we're ready to go through our setup wizard. So we're ready to power up the system here, and it should ask us what system we're going to be using. In this case, we are running the Jackpot. And then we're going to go over here and go through our wizard, our start wizard. So we're going to use Imperial units. I'm going to read everything in air fuel. Well, obviously we have a Hemi. Like I mentioned earlier, we have a 58 tooth reluctor ring. I do have a camshaft in this engine, but I always like to use the stock cam profile to start with, just to get things going. It automatically chose this map sensor. It should be the one that come with the kit here, but just read the part number on it to match up with yours. I am running dual widebands. I am doing drive-by-wire. And I'm using the factory 2011 Jeep throttle pedal, so we'll just use custom. I'm using the factory 2011 Jeep throttle body. We'll also use custom there. No, we're not using the transmission control. This one's a 5-speed manual. We have 8 injectors. These particular injectors are the 65 pound/hour fuel injectors, but just double check your manufacturer's injector flow rate and punch in the correct number here. And then this is a 5.7 Hemi, so it's 345 cubic inches. If you have a 392 or a 6.4, whatever, you just you get your engine displacement punched in there. And then it's going to automatically show our firing order here. And we can go back and change this at any time, but 750 hot idle speed, that's pretty good to start with. And then it should just go through and ask me to confirm everything. And I'll save it, and yes. And then now I'll turn the key off. So we're going to power back on. There's one more thing that I want to mention before we move on from the wizard. And we're going to go right in here and go to tuning. And we're going to go to fuel and basic. And we're going to make sure that our fuel system pressure is set to whatever the system and the injectors are rated for. These are rated for 58 PSI, which I'll get into that in just a second. But you do want to make sure that the computer knows what your fuel pressure is. So we're gonna save that, and we are good to go. So now that we have our wizard complete, we're just this close to being able to fire this rig up. One thing you always want to make sure before you try to fire it off is you want to get your fuel pressure set right. This particular system with these particular injectors calls for 58 PSI. I actually already have my fuel pressure regulator set to 58 PSI. But if you don't, it's really simple. You're going to turn your key on, prime your fuel system, check your fuel pressure gauge, and make adjustments on your regulator accordingly. We're ready to turn the key on this thing, but I'm going to rein myself back just a little bit. I'm going to get out there. I'm going to double check my connections, check for fuel leaks. Once I do that, we're twisting the key. We're going to hear this thing run. So everything looked pretty good under there. Let's go twist on this key. See what she sounds like. So we got this thing running. It sounds super good. We're gonna let it sit here and idle for about 30 minutes or so, kind of let the computer figure some things out, and then we're gonna take this thing out, do some truck stuff with it.
Oh no, no, don't start on me. Don't do this. Don't do this. Oh, keep going, keep going. Ah, crap. Oh. Crap. Dadgummit, come on. I ain't sitting out here. It's 100 degrees. I'm gonna call Justin.
Hey man.
Hey buddy, you got your truck running?
Man, yeah, I got my truck running.
Good. Look, I'm out riding around in the Nova and the carburetor's messed up again. You mind coming to get me?
I'm on my way.
Dang, son, you got here quick. Does that thing got a Hemi in it?
Hell yeah, it's got a Hemi in it. Well, I hope you all enjoyed my pretty cringy skit there. Jesse and I worked really hard on that. Anyway, I just wanted to touch back in. I have driven the truck a little more since the initial startup video. I would say, I don't know, I'd say I've run 30 to 50 miles on it. I don't really have a functioning odometer yet. The truck is still very much so a project, but thanks to Aces, it is now a running and driving Hemi-powered project. I would like to go in and give a pretty well, honest review on what I think about the system. Overall, the installation was extremely straightforward. As you guys know, I have installed an Aces system on my 68 Dodge Dart. You can go back and check out that video on my channel. And, being as I've already kind of had one of these installs under my belt, there really wasn't anything to it. Even without it, without that prior install, there was just not a lot to it really. I had that 4-wire hookup, everything plugged in nice like it should. And the thing has honestly run great ever since the first time I touched the key. Now I can tell for sure the more I drive it, the better it runs. I do plan on getting it remote tuned by Brian Stillwell. I had him remote tune the Dart actually. I probably had 3,000 or 4,000 miles on that car before I had him remote tune it, and it was running really good. But I don't even know how, but he made it run way better. Like, not necessarily for power per se, but just how smooth everything is with that car now after he remote tuned it. It's insane. So I will definitely be getting him into this truck, letting him remote tune this truck as well. But overall, this kit has been extremely straightforward. I haven't had a moment's issue. It's it literally fired up first turn of the key, and it's just been running ever since. I haven't had to go back in and change anything. I haven't touched the tune in the computer or anything like that. And I mean, like I said, I've driven it 30, 40, 50 miles, something like that, and it runs really good, even just cruising around. And I will say that the drive-by wire throttle is a kind of touchy, but I'm hoping we can get in there and kind of fine-tune that with the remote tune. But this thing runs phenomenal for being just an out-the-box, no tune. You know, this is a 2011 eagle-headed 5.7 Hemi with a comp 270 cam and headers, and yeah, it runs good, runs really good. So definitely can't complain a lick about that. I really appreciate Aces for their help and getting me this kit. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. We tried to put a good amount of effort into these Aces install videos, trying to give you all the information we possibly can, hopefully to ease the installation along for if any of you guys are interested in doing something like that in the future. But I really appreciate you guys for watching. Thank you, Aces, for your support, and I hope you'll tune in next time.